Want to plan your next fishing trip without the hassle? FishingBooker.com is the best way to find and book a fishing charter anywhere in the world. Whether you're chasing trophy fish or just looking for a family day on the water, Fishing Booker makes it simple, fast, and secure. With thousands of experienced guides, verified reviews, and 24/7 customer support, Fishing Booker takes the guesswork out of planning. Visit FishingBooker.com and book your trip today. Fishing Booker. Fishing trips made easy.
At T-Mobile, our critical mission is providing unparalleled 5G coverage for when connectivity is mission critical. Introducing T-Priority, America's best 5G network experience for first responders, even in times of congestion. More capacity, faster speeds, better coverage. T-Priority from T-Mobile, built for tomorrow's emergencies, ready today. Discover more at t-priority.com.
For qualifying organizations on eligible rate plans, coverage not available in some areas and may be impacted by emergencies.
Today we're diving into a conversation about one of the most underappreciated and often misunderstood sources of protein, bugs. While many cultures around the world have embraced edible insects for centuries, Western diets have been slower to adopt this sustainable and nutrient-rich food source. But that's starting to change, thanks to passionate advocates who are breaking down barriers, educating the public, and even hosting bug-centric dining experiences. Stick around as we explore the world of Entomophagy. Challenge some common misconceptions, and maybe even convince you to add a few six-legged snacks to your plate.
Join Justin Townsend and the Harvesting Nature crew as they explore the world of cooking wild fish and game while sharing recipes, tips, tricks, and lessons learned from their pursuit of wild food. We sure hope you ate before the show, 'cause you're gonna leave hungry. This is the Wild Fish and Game Podcast.
Let me get through a couple of items, then I'll introduce who our guest is. She's right here. You already heard her, so we'll share that in just a moment. So next up on the Wild Fish and Game Podcast, we'll be getting into brining, corning, and making pastrami on our Wild Kitchen segment. I think it's very coincidentally timed with, I think, one of the greatest brining and corning holidays of American and North American tradition. I don't know, maybe Irish, but I won't take it as far as that. We'll see all the corned venison recipes hit Instagram, and corned beef and green beer and all those things. I would say if you have any food things you would like us to cover, any specific food related topics, just widespread, like you can be like, hey, tell me more about burritos, and we will tell you more about burritos. Let us know. Shoot us a message on Instagram or drop us an email. Our email is whatscooking@harvestingnature.com. And then I guess for me, I'm going to be traveling next month up to Pennsylvania to do a veterans hunt with our former podcast producer, Corey. We'll be doing that. And then I think I'm going to do a catfish trip here on the Potomac just right before that. Literally the day that I'm going to leave for that, I think I'm going to do a morning and then drive 5 hours and go do pheasant hunting on Saturday. So it's going to be a busy day. That's kind of what's going on. And then looking forward to the foraging and maple syrup season here in the mid-Atlantic, as well as turkey. All right, Adam, what do you got?
Not too much new. I'm still just cooking away, testing out a whole bunch of wild recipes, clearing out my freezer faster than I've ever done so before. So I hope I can, get some early hunts in and fill it back up again. Getting ready for maple syrup season as well. I'm going to be heading over to a friend's place soon, where they just have the super old school, like taps in a bucket kind of deal. And I'll be helping them out boiling some sugar down soon. So yeah, super excited about that, and getting ready for turkey. So that's about it for me.
Awesome. I will say this, that we are damn near close having the sausage book done. I'm shooting the last of the photographs tonight, which is going to be great. So the art of venison sausage making, it's been probably like a 3-month ordeal, Adam, I think, us putting this together. Yeah. So really great. I'm really excited to put it out. I think it's a fun project. It has been a fun project. But it's going to be a go-to guide for anybody at any experience level to learn how to make sausage, with like 30 different recipes for sausages themselves, as well as a few recipes of things to do with sausage beyond just throw it in the pan or put it on the grill. So that's pretty exciting. And then 2, we're going to be releasing the December Pig Camp dates here relatively soon. So we'll do that. Now that we got all that out of the way, I'll introduce our guest here. So today's guest is the founder of Bugable, a blog about the world of edible insects and hub for unique events relating to edible insects like wine and bug pairings and bug dinners across North America. A passionate advocate for public health and insect farming, she's worked with prominent figures and companies like Bill Nye the Science Guy, Forbes, Vice, Food and Wine, and others, teaching about and promoting entomophagy.
There you go.
Yeah!
Yeah, he did it.
Or the eating of bugs. Aly Moore, welcome to the Wild Fish and Game podcast.
Thank you so much. It is great to be here and to hear you say that word.
Yeah, I did it. It's a new vocabulary word now. I'm proud of myself. I don't often get tongue-tied, but when I do, man, it just really sinks. So
I think half the reason I want to do this show is because I love the word so much.
You say it. You say it, Adam.
Entomophagy.
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 There we go.
Yeah.
We got it now. Everybody listening, you have to say it 3 times fast, really quickly, before we'll carry on. We'll wait. Just kidding. All right, Aly, I guess could you, I gave a brief introduction, but could you sort of expand on your background and how did you become interested in cooking and eating bugs?
Yeah, certainly. It's a shocker to me as well. This is not at all where I intended my life to go or thought it would. And I'm actually pretty afraid of live insects. A lot of people make the mistake of thinking that, oh, she works with bugs, cooks bugs, eats bugs. She must be fine. Go kill that spider for me. Go, look at that bug. No. I think it's a testament to if I can do it, anyone can. I'm lower than average brave when it comes to those things. And to be frank, if a chicken was running at me, I might get a little skittish as well. And if a live bug is running at me, I'll be a little afraid. And that's the way it is. I expect my ingredients to be dead, mostly dead, or small and controllable. I have a background in public health and food policy, actually took a career turn into contextualized e-commerce for the first 5 years of my working life, but kept a foot in the door with public health, food policy, and all that by starting to blog about this really cool emerging industry I had learned about. The light bulb moment was when I was working in Mexico for a summer, and they have these awesome taco stands with tacos de chapulines, which are grasshoppers. You've had them, I take?
Oh, yeah.
I have. Yeah, my local taco shop here. So I'm in DC. My local taco shop has them on, and every time I go in, I try to order them, and they're like, we don't have them yet. And I'm like, oh, come on. They're like, they're seasonal. And I was like, I get that, but come on, guys. You got to get this on the menu.
Delicious, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's what did it.
Yeah.
I had those. And at first I was curious about how I could get them in the States and wanted to prank my family for upcoming Thanksgiving. And so my first, very nefarious goals, I was trying to make cookies with cricket flour or whatever I could find at the time. The industry was very new. This was before our a couple big white papers, before our trade organization, and a lot of other cool things that have happened since. But bought some bugs at Petco and cooked them up for myself, learned to not surprise people with insects for many reasons, which we can get into, and now take it a lot more seriously. I'll post about these big gnarly bugs for the sensationalism aspect, but increasingly I'm trying to be respectful culturally of many communities that eat insects, and then also just not perpetuating the narrative that insects are an emergency food or a poor person's food or food for, anything that is marginalized or whatnot, and to not pigeonhole insects as a novelty ingredient that are just sold in lollipops at gas stations. So the work is ride that balance of get attention, get more funding in the space, help the industry scale up, contribute to the community positively, while also breaking some of the narratives up that exist, like the stigma and the dirtiness of them and all these other myths.
Oh, well, I guess earlier last year, I was in Minnesota and ate at Sean Sherman's Owamni. It's a Native American restaurant there, and had crickets and popcorn as like an appetizer. And I think that is the most coolest combination. I think too, if you've got folks that maybe have never had it before, it's a great like mix because you get the popcorn and the crunchiness in there. And you're not like, I don't really know what I'm crunching, but it was flavored really well. And like, it was good. It was good.
We were talking to Maria Gladstone last week, and when we brought up that you were going to be on our podcast next, she ran out to her pantry and pulled out a bag of chocolate-covered crickets, I think. Yeah, that she had in there too. So there's more of us than it seems. I think more of us bug
amazing.
eaters.
The industry has a running joke that we call it airplane test for the status of the industry, and it's if you're on an airplane and you bust out a bag of crickets as your in-flight snack. What happens? A, does somebody shriek in terror and try to get away from you? B, do they say, I've actually heard about that before. Like, I'm curious. Or C, do they reach out and ask for some or have already had some? And I think we're somewhere between the last two. No longer in the first camp, which is nice.
That's good. That's progress.
That's good. Yeah. I took some to work a couple months ago, and like, anytime somebody would come by my desk, I was like, you got to try these. And of course, you get like some takers and you get some people that are just, generally curious and they're like, I'll watch somebody else do it and then maybe I'll do it. But I'm excited to talk more about this because I think from my perspective, I've only thought of it as sort of like the emergency food or now like this snack that you see in places. And then, of course, growing up and seeing like the gas station candies. So excited for you to sort of open my mind a little bit more to it, which will be good. First off, I've got a question for you though. And we ask this to kind of everyone that comes on the show, but what do you have in your fridge or freezer or pantry that you're looking forward to cooking next?
Ooh, well, I have been using a little home micro mealworm farm to keep my kitchen waste to a minimum. Thanks.
Yeah.
The company that made them, Biobia, I don't think they're making the same product anymore. I think they've pivoted to letting pet owners grow their own pet food at home. But at first they were testing it out as like a home composter equivalent that lets you become a micro rancher. So I am most looking forward to cooking up the freezer full of mealworms that I have grown myself off of food waste and putting them into smoothies. And then in the cupboard, it would be, I have a lot of black ants that I'm looking forward to experimenting more with. They're like the caviar of the bug world.
Ooh.
They are so delicious. They taste like lemon pepper and they have no seasoning. It's just from their formic acid. And they are way better than cold ease. If you've ever used that when you think you have a cold coming on, just like a zinc shock therapy. Ants are the natural highest source of zinc in a very bioavailable form. So they're just really cool. Yeah.
And so if you think you have a cold coming on, you should eat ants.
That's absolutely.
How many ants?
I think to get a serving, you need about 400, but just like a little tablespoon.
Sure.
Yeah.
Oh man.
That's good because I often have ants in my pantry. They're not there on purpose, but now I know what to do with them.
You gotta make sure they haven't come into contact with any poison.
Yes, really good.
Country ants are way better than city ants.
Ooh, there we go. All right, that's good. Those are very unique. I like it. Back to this word, entomophagy. Can you explain what it is?
It is a word we need to rework. And we tried in the beginning, the insect people, there's a word for people that eat insects and it's entomophagy right now, but we're looking for something like vegan, vegetarian, pescatarian, something that rolls off the tongue a little better. But it's the scientific term used to describe peoples or cultures that consume insects. And so I'm an entomophagist, not an entomologist, which would be somebody who has a Pokedex full of information about every single insect on the planet. I just focus on the ones that are edible and how to use those flavors and how to use those health benefits and how to talk about the sustainability wins.
How many cultures around the world do you think, I guess now, consume bugs? And then how many historically?
So this is the part that might surprise a lot of people, especially us Westerners, but the average, or the estimate is over 80% of global populations consume bugs in some way. And, I don't think they're counting our culture, even though we all do, with the red dye, or if you like chocolate, peanut butter, or ketchup. Those are the foods with the highest pieces per unit of food with insects in them, because they're allowed to fall into the mixing vats or packaging facilities. It's just normal. People don't realize that. But if you look around, the whole world has varied eating habits. And I think a country in the Eastern Europe thinks that lobsters are barbaric to eat and we enjoy them. So they look at us like the weirdos. We might raise an eyebrow at practices that are super common in other parts of the world. In China, dried crickets are served in bars, not just on street food vendors, but in Korea, South Korea, there's a bundagi, which is like a silkworm pupa soup. And I like pointing those two out because it's just interesting how some nations that are close together, and like we might kind of say, oh, they eat bugs. Well, the Chinese look at the worms and say, ew, worms, anything that squirms like that, that's actually gross. The Koreans look at the crickets and go, ew, anything with legs that can hop, that's actually gross. And so it's just like,
there's some division inside.
Every culture is unique. What's normal? Like a culture might think, I don't eat bugs. We just have this one dish that has an insect in it, right? So that's to explain that 80% of the population is, considered to eat bugs in some capacity.
That's awesome.
I can give a couple other cool ones. Like in Bali, dragonfly soup is big. In Thailand, it's a food enthusiast's feast. You can find everything from scorpions to water bugs. In South Africa, these mopani worms are such a staple to diets that they were at risk of being over harvested. So they had to slow the roll there. They're so nutritionally dense and sustainable. They just make a lot of sense. And then for like modern resurgences of eating bugs, like the EU is crushing it. They're way ahead of the US, as is Australia, with their regulatory landscape, government support, and just kind of using insects in an innovative way. We can talk more about that, but the history piece, just to close that out, is rich and fascinating. Like some people think that humans evolved our big brains by eating insects. We used tools a little bit better at some point in our evolution, stuck a stick deeper into the termite mound, accessed the queens and like the fattier termites, those omega-3s and 6s that fueled our today brain development. Native Americans ate insects. I looked up some just fresh, like some cool facts. Like Aristotle is quoted as describing one of the grub delicacies that both wealthy and, poor people enjoy together. The ancient Greeks didn't eat as many insects, but a lot of other old European, groups did. The Romans. We don't talk about it as much anymore, I think, in the West, because when explorers came over and they were men of God and looking to be godly men, yet killing tons of native peoples, they had to have a narrative that worked. And othering is the term we use, where they came over here, looked at the natives eating insects and said, we have to save these barbarians from themselves. So that practice we continued, as well as having lots of media about, giant scary spiders killing everyone, and some cultures that associate insects with death, decay, and rot. So there's a public relations campaign that's needed to showcase how insects have a huge role in our food system and should be scaled up to the level that livestock has been, if for nothing more than to provide the fertilizer, animal feed, and waste management that we so desperately need today.
Oh, that's you have like given up. There's a lot of perspectives in there. I think that we'll unpack a little bit, but the history piece is, definitely fascinating. I'm doing a lot of research now. I'm reading a book, The Rediscovery of American History, and it's like a lot more focused on the Native American narrative, and it's way into that. So definitely a lot of what you're talking about hits those chords, which is, it's great. It's something that needs to be discussed more. I 100% agree. And I do think about sort of the way our society here in the US has shaped a lot of food things. That sort of concept of othering has evolved for so many things. And that's why, we get things like we get trash fish, we get, oh, don't eat that, that's gamey. Oh, don't, we don't do that. We just go
All
to the
the
store
offal.
and buy things. All the offal. We don't eat liver. We don't eat heart. We don't eat kidneys. Like those things. Don't do that. We're, I'm on board for this. So why do you think that people outside of sort of the othering, I guess you mentioned the PR campaign that's needed. What steps have you all taken to sort of shift the narrative back to where you feel it belongs? And then what sort of resistance are you met with?
Yeah, great question, especially today. The narrative has, people have a lot of different mindsets about how best to push the insect industry forward in the US in particular, since we're such a powerful consumer base. But the truth is that we need a multi-pronged approach, and there's a bunch of different magic words that work for different groups of people or groups of stakeholders. The thing that I'm personally most dedicated to is kind of expanding the narrative today. I think people have heard the message that insects are high in protein. There's an easy way to shut that down where it's like, well, there's lots of other ways to get protein. And especially in America, if you give even a hint that you're coming to take meat off the table, which has never been any insect person's goal. We're all about biodiversity and the circle of food and how, we've in modern days kind of eliminated the circle of life that is meant to be and made it very linear, it being food production. It's all very extraction based, extract from the soil without replenishing it or pour chemicals all over it, extract nutrients, inevitably that leads to lower nutrient density in crops, and then actually lower nutrient density in the animals that eat those crops. So the spinach we're eating today is like 70%, fact check me on this, but like a significantly lower amount of magnesium and other macro and micronutrients than it did in the 1970s. Same thing with meat. And there's also a lot more antibiotic use on livestock. And if you just fix one thing called using insects like nature does, insects poop is frass. It's the most potent biofertilizer you could have. It has all these incredible effects, including lowering the need for pesticide use. It's like nature kind of gets it right. It replenishes the microbial diversity that is needed in that soil, which leads to healthier crops, leads to healthier animals and healthier people. Same story with insects being fed to fish, chickens, things that literally eat them in the wild. But we've only just passed legislation recently within the last 3 years that has re-legalized it so that you can feed industrial scale fish or chickens insects, which is pretty wild. And when you feed them what they right, because the corn and soy lobbies, it's all very complicated, but when you feed them what they evolved to eat, you get great health outcomes, like a lower need for antibiotics. And that's kind of my main goal, is let's expand the narrative.
Man, that is very apparent in today's conversations, talking about with the price of eggs and chicken. And there is a proposition from like one of the leading chicken experts now to vaccinate chickens against the avian flu, which I think is the worst idea ever.
Yeah. And there's enough half truths right now. Like my kind of cherry on top is that we live in an overly politicized age where things that don't need to be are. And that's like, honestly, the last 2 years has been the roughest. I've been getting way more death threats and stuff because people think that I'm bought and paid for by the UN or the World Economic Forum or some Brussels team, and that I've been on the job like trying to replace Americans' meat with bugs. And that and when you follow the money, like DeSantis made a claim, you can take this out if you don't want it in there, but he made a claim like several times that now they want you to eat bugs. And he's just trying to pigeonhole this narrative. And when you look at some of his biggest funders, they're fertilizer companies. Like like, of course, somebody who gets paid a lot of money by a chemical input, group is not going to like something that presents a low to no cost solution for better soil health in part. So it's a bunch of regulatory capture, like that is what I say. And it's just like, we've already gotten into a lot of the nerdy stuff, but I can't get through like 25% of what I've just told you without people's eyes glazing over, because it's far too nerdy and sciencey. So
I love it. It's funny. I do see anecdotally in the hunting world, just through social media and whatever, kind of two camps. when it comes to eating bugs. And one is kind of where we're sitting, like there's interest in adding it to your wild food. There's the big cicada flushes or whatever you call them. In the recent years, people were eating, cooking, and experimenting, which is really cool to see. And then the other side is that you kind of mentioned, the side that like, you're not going to take away our meat and make us eat bugs. But I never really understood that, because even if there was this cabal that was trying to make everyone eat bugs, hunters don't depend on the food system for food as much. So why are you so upset about it all? And that's not the case anyway. So hopefully if there's people on that side of the fence, kind of take a step back and take a breather and listen, because there's I think a lot of cool, really interesting, if nothing else, like you said, just feeding chickens insects. It makes so much more sense. So much more sense, let alone all the rest of the stuff.
I guess since Adam gave the perfect segue here, so why, aside from like completing sort of the circle of life, aside from the cultural support behind it, why should we add bugs to our diet?
Yeah, so I now include a disclaimer before I launch into this, in case, I think that food is so deeply personal, cultural, psychological, and I'm not here to tell anybody what to eat. I just think that it's really fun, and, be open to the idea of bugs for all the aforementioned reasons. And if you're culinarily curious and just interested in new ingredients or like new functional foods that you can add to your diet, that's why you should eat bugs. I think it's a really fun ecosystem for anyone that loves cooking. It's like you have a crayon box and you just discover that there's about 2,000 more colors that you haven't been using. And that's the case with insects. I think it's such a fun moment for chefs and other, foodies to get involved in, where there's about 2,000 cataloged species of edible insects, tons more. They're so malleable. Like if those crickets that you had in that popcorn, they're so small that they quite literally are what they eat. So if you're growing small batch of crickets specifically for a use, you could feed them mint, and then they'll have a little mint flavor. And it's just like really fun,
that's cool.
Right? Like the smaller generational cycle. And certainly if you're concerned with the future of food and space travel, like it makes so much sense to use insects. Black soldier fly larvae are perfect. They'll break down pretty much any organic substance in 2 weeks. So if you like composting, this is next level. 2 weeks to break down any organic substance, turn it into incredibly nutritious body fat and protein, which you can feed to yourself or animals, and then their poop for the plants. And it's perfect in a closed loop environment. So I think for the future of more, as we have more and more densely populated cities and we want to reduce our food transport cost and we want to locally produce food or locally eliminate waste, perfect way to do it. If you want to think about space travel, you need, there's been a huge wave of support for insects from the federal FPEP. What was it? Something about scaling up the domestic fertilizer supply to make us less dependent on foreign inputs. That's why insects got a huge swing of support very recently. And then there's other cool science stuff too, like the antimicrobial peptides in insects, snails or other insects, maggots that have these secretionary systems. It's like if you licked the floor, you'd have to have a pretty good immune system to be okay after that. And these things are constantly licking the floor. So they have these antimicrobial peptides that are really interesting to scientists for their quick, iterative, biologically based solutions to infections, or the counter to the antibiotic trend I see right now. So there's a lot of different angles that we can look at this from.
That's crazy, because when you just said snails, I hadn't even put escargot or snails into that category, that I'm like, oh wow, yeah, I love escargot.
Yeah, me too.
It's one of my favorites. So I guess I do eat insects a lot.
Yeah, there's some asterisks because those aren't technically insects, nor are spiders or scorpions, but we lump them all in.
That's fair. Would you say bug or insects, or are they just interchangeable?
I use it interchangeably. That's not technically correct, and entomology people will maybe be offended. A true bug has a pretty strict set of definitions, but for simplicity's sake, I interchange them.
Okay, cool.
This episode is brought to you by Peacock. The new Peacock original documentary, Matthew Perry, A Hollywood Tragedy, dives deep into the beloved actor's rise to fame and his tragic death. 5 people, including Perry's personal assistant, 2 medical doctors, and an alleged Hollywood drug dealer known as the Ketamine Queen, were charged with conspiracy to illegally provide Perry with the ketamine. Explore the details of the case in this heartbreaking special, streaming now only on Peacock.
This episode is brought to you by State Farm. From your morning podcast to your afternoon playlist, State Farm knows you personalize your entire day, and that's why State Farm helps you personalize your insurance with the State Farm Personal Price Plan. It offers coverage options that help protect what you care about most at an affordable price just for you. Like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Prices vary by state. Options selected by customer. Availability and eligibility may vary.
All right, so let's dive a little bit more into sort of the eating aspect of it. So, first off, are all bugs safe to eat?
No.
Okay.
No.
Which bugs are best suited for like the dinner plate? Which should we like? What are the choice? I guess we could go like low shelf, mid shelf, upper shelf if there is one. Is
absolutely
a fun approach?
We can do that.
Okay.
Yeah. Are you guys going to be trying any bugs?
Yes, it's coming up. Well, so unfortunately, my delivery was delayed. It will not arrive until tomorrow. It was supposed to be here today, and it did not work out.
I have bugs, so I'll eat bugs all by myself.
Adam's going to eat bugs all by himself.
If you guys send me a good mailing address for each of you after this too, I should have offered before, but I'll send you like a little bug taster kit from my own stock too.
Oh yeah, no, I would love that. I'll definitely do that. Should we taste? Should Adam taste now, or should we'll save that for just a bit?
You can save it for the bit or whatever makes sense to you guys. I don't know if you have the bugs I'll be talking about, but if you do.
Let's see, I have grasshoppers, mole crickets, silkworms, field crickets, sago worms, and there's salt in there too.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
I'd say that's a great low shelf starter kit. Like those are really great intro bugs. In the US, you'll find that crickets and mealworms are the 2 most talked about just because there was already a framework to farm these. There's been a whole new grading system for insects meant for humans, but you think about like the Petcos and whatnot, growing crickets and mealworms for exotic birds and snakes and reptiles. Like there's already a lot of infrastructure around that. So those were scaled up out of happenstance, not out of kind of best fit. And if you're out, do you want me to touch on like the survival elements of these 2 or stick to?
Sure. Yeah. Whatever you want to talk about. We're good.
Cool. So, as somebody who grew up watching Survivor, that's always kind of in the back of my mind, I think. And I'm like, why don't these people just eat bugs? And so many times in that show, there's one person off in the corner eating worms or something, and everybody else like, ew, that's so nasty. Yet they're starving. So just interesting. That's what I would do if I went on that show. Would be like really focusing on the local insects that I know are safe. I'd avoid. There's a couple rules with them. Don't eat any insect that's already dead. I think that's the case with most wild game out there. You know, you don't know why it's dead. It's probably started decaying or maybe came in contact with poison. Also, just try to avoid anything that's fuzzy or brightly colored, even though it may be safe to eat unless you're an expert, you don't know, and play it safe. There's like a few poisonous grasshoppers, for example. And caterpillars are one of the most commonly eaten insects in the world, but they're not recommended to eat by anyone unless you're very experienced, because like mushrooms, there's a lot of very poisonous ones out there. That's another reason why, slugs and snails are also recommended to avoid unless you know what they've been feeding on, because some of them feed on very toxic mushrooms. So those are the kind of ground rules. And then keep in mind, if you have an allergic reaction to crustaceans or bed bugs, you might be allergic to insects, as the protein in their exoskeleton is quite similar.
Oh, that's good to know.
Yeah, so always start with tasting a little bit first, make sure it sits well, and then dive in to it.
Not 400 ants.
Not off the bat. Yeah, 1 or 2, fine. Yeah, and then the last one is, if you're in a city, don't eat the bugs there, because they come in contact with gross things that you don't want in you.
So sidewalk roaches are off the table?
Off the table. Off the table.
No.
Completely.
Yes.
I also learned never serve people roaches. I did one dinner where I made a roach chili, and that one freaked everyone out. Roaches are a hard one for people to overcome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd even have a tough time with that.
Yeah, I think I would too.
Yep.
I'd go for it, but...
So, these are lessons learned. But bottom shelf, I'd say crickets, mealworms, grasshoppers, sago grubs, superworms. Those are kind of the most common. If you were lost in a field overnight, I don't know why you need to do this, but if you want to catch grasshoppers or crickets, grasshoppers, maybe early morning when they're a little bit slower. These are all cold-blooded animals. So that's part of the reason they're so efficient. And they have a great feed conversion ratio, FCR, which is the ratio at which they convert body mass or feed into body mass. And for crickets, it's like 0.9 to 1, which is insanely good, given that for a chicken, I think it's 2 to 1 on average. For a pig, I think it's 4 to 1. And for a cow, I think it's like 9 to 1 or something like that. And it takes about 1,000 gallons of water for a pound of soy to be grown. And it takes 1 gallon of water for a pound of crickets to be grown. So things like that make them just sustainable options if you're in a pinch. Crickets, you can set up pretty easy cricket traps. Just cut the top off of a plastic water bottle, bury it a little bit underground, put some fruit or some bait inside there, and then come back to it. And the next morning, crickets are most active at night. And you'll probably be able to clap a hand over it and collect some crickets. So those are, and then under logs and whatnot, you can find grubs. Sago grubs are not native to the US, but earthworms are. You can eat those. I don't think they taste good at all. And with things like earthworms that might have parasites or like nematodes that you don't want in you definitely boil them first.
Oh, that's a good tip.
Yeah. Most insects, that's the case for every wild insect. You can eat most of them alive or raw, but you always should boil them. That just makes it safe. Should we go up a shelf?
Yeah, let's go up a shelf, mid-shelf.
Mid-shelf, I'd say, is bamboo worms. Really cool if you ever get a chance to try one. They taste cold. And I've never had, this is what I mean by, really cool tasting notes. Like, the taste is cold.
Really?
Yeah. And, buttery. They kind of melt in your mouth.
How would you prepare it?
Bamboo worms, I have ground them up. I have them, they're not native to North America either. I'll try to stick to more native ones, but they're from Thailand, and I just love their really unique texture. So I grind them up and then use them to coat something, the coating that marzipan has on it. That's familiar, like that kind of rubs off on your fingers.
Yeah.
That's kind of the effect that you get. So I'll make these worm fudge mallows. Well, I'll take a marshmallow, coat a little bit of honey around it, and then roll it in crushed bamboo worms.
Whoa, that's really cool.
It's weird sounding, but it's really satisfying from the flavors, the textures when you bite into it.
And my mind is just racing with venison loins rolled in ground bugs that have different flavors and like mushroom batter almost.
Yes.
Yeah.
Would love to see that.
Yeah.
I think there's a really cool world where if there's hesitance with eating the bugs, they're really cool for seasonings. Just the textures and flavors that it can bring in. Pretty nifty. So middle shelf would also be, let's see, I put grasshoppers there, the chapulines. I'd put locusts mid shelf. I'd put roly-polies. Those are you can find those anywhere. And they're actually North America's only land crustaceans. A lot of insects are descendants of crustaceans, but they're not directly related. They branched off a while ago. I don't understand why really, but roly-polies are land crustaceans. They fix our soil. You can eat them. Pretty easy to find anywhere. Just collect, boil, consume.
I've heard those taste like shrimp.
Yes, they're actually called land shrimp for that reason. They taste very
cool. Oh, cool.
Can you fry them just like as you would just fried crunchy roly-polies?
Yeah, and with all these you can eat the whole bug. So with a normal crustacean you might peel the skin or not eat certain parts. You can eat everything, and the exoskeleton is a really good type of fiber called chitin.
Oh, that's neat. Okay.
So let's go a little higher up, and I'd say, in the middle, let's also put stink bugs, which you normally want to avoid smelly insects. These ones, however, kind of paradoxically, they're really, really yummy and pretty safe to eat. They have an aromatic hydrocarbon that gives them like a green apple flavor. It's really weird. It's like a hint of green apple. They don't taste like an apple, but they have that flavor
hint
on
of it.
Well, that sucks that my house was overcome with them last year. I could have been eating them.
Yeah.
They were all like on the outside of my house, like 1,000 of them. Oh well. Maybe they'll come out.
Those I love dry roasting them, dehydrating them or something. And they have a lot of natural oil that makes them have the texture of a sunflower seed. So they're pretty mellow.
So cool.
That's very cool. I was gonna save this for like the foraging and sort of like cooking, but we're just kind of all over the place, which is great. I love it. My mind is full of so many questions. How do you kill a bug to eat it?
Yeah, so the most humane way I think to kill bugs is to put them in the refrigerator and then the freezer. Since they're cold-blooded, they will fall asleep and then just not wake up. And that's the way that that's the kill step in a lot of cricket farms. If you're in and it's, I think, way more humane than a lot of current factory farming. That's another big issue some people will have is I get people that say they're from PETA, I'm not so sure, that are like, how could you be doing this to bugs? Like, this is a cruel extension of factory farming. And I'm like, well, okay, if you have a problem with this, first go to the pesticide companies that are gassing thousands of insects. That's maybe the problem. Insects that are raised for human consumption live a full life. They become old crickets, if you will, their 3-week life cycle, and then they get to live in ideal situations where they're just mass living is ideal for insects that live like that, a couple egg cartons, pizza boxes, and voila. And then some of them are weighed, and the bigger ones will be left to reproduce, and the rest will be frozen and then cleaned and processed. But if you're in the wild, the way that you do the kill step is just smush them, smush the head or whatever. Or if you're collecting ants, let's say, that one's a little more finicky because you need so many of them. They're actually pretty great. Like, that's the one thing I'd recommend most to anyone in an actual survival situation, because there are ants on every continent except Antarctica, Iceland, and Greenland, I think. A couple islands. And ants are really great at leading you to them with their little pheromone trails. They're also really great at leading you to water because they'll always have access to water. So you can find an anthill, and then we'll know that somewhere nearby there's going to be water below ground, somewhere a little bit to the side. And then one of the best methods is either sticking a stick into the anthill and letting ants run up and then shaking it off into some container. That's actually the best method. Like, only in an emergency would you fill the ant hole with water, because then you're completely destroying it.
Yeah.
But you keep those ants in the water and then just boil them a little bit over fire.
Perfect. Sorry, I derailed. All right, mid-shelf to top shelf.
Mid-shelf to top shelf is, we talked about locusts. I'd also say the giant water bug is pretty cool. That one's like that. It's an aquatic beetle.
Really
you might have seen. Yeah, they're predatory, so they're kind of scary. Big old eyes. I love that one. It's just kind of a shock factor, and it tastes like a pumpkin seed, right?
Pumpkin seed.
So,
that's cool.
Yeah, they taste pretty good. They're very fibrous. I like to put those in Bloody Marys instead of a shrimp. Like a giant water bug. I also think that scorpions, their cool factor outweighs their scary factor. They also taste fantastic. You can cook them just like you would lobster, and they are affectionately called little land lobster.
So you just break off the tail with the stinger, and then you're good to go?
Yeah, so for the venom sac is on like the last 2 segments. So it's also, though, venomous and not poisonous. The big difference here being poisonous is don't eat it at all. Yeah. Venom, cook it to denature it. So if you have like an armored-tailed scorpion or a Manchurian scorpion, You can find them if you're in the desert at night with a black light because they all glow, which is super cool. Or just look for them in a scorpion den, which will be under a log, under a rock ledge, somewhere with a little bit of shelter, and then kill them with a longer stick or knife so as to not get poked, and then stick them on a stick and roast it over a fire. If you're at home, pan sear that with a little bit of like olive oil, lemon zest, or ants instead of the lemon zest.
Ants.
Salt and pepper, and it's like a little lobster, and it tastes really good, like a little briny. I'm a huge scorpion fan, and then tarantula is also top shelf.
And so I think of like scorpion is like having a very, we'll unpack the tarantula in just a second for sure. But the scorpion, I think of like a scorpion having like armor almost. You can just crunch right through it.
Yeah, different difficulty levels for sure. Like a black forest scorpion, that one's much more chitinous, fibrous. It's not, if you're eating it after it's been dehydrated or roasted, it's going to be a little chewier. The mid segment's going to be the tastiest. If you just want to, you can eat the claws for some reason. But if they're littler scorpions, they're very soft, and it's just like a chewy jerky texture. Nice.
You see, growing up, so I grew up in Oklahoma, and we had like the little brown, they're probably like the size of a pinky. We'd find them, they'd be like on the wall of the house or like, randomly. Those are like good eating size.
Perfect. Yeah.
Sweet.
Yeah. Highly recommend that. A fun fact about cooking those at home is a lot of insects have a weird reanimation thing. Like some people reported leaving worms in the freezer for a month and taking them out, and once they heat up, they start moving again. Even more so with scorpions. So just be extra careful if you have frozen scorpions and you're thawing them. Do a kill step so that they don't come back to life.
Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah, I don't really know why it's so present. They're just really resilient creatures, and I guess they can survive for a long time in a dormant state.
Wow, that's incredible.
That was just a nightmare. Like, this never happened to me, and I do not want it to ever happen to
me. Where did the scorpions go? They're gone.
No.
There was a whole sheet pan of scorpions here. Oh, anxiety. Whew.
Yes.
There's one that I'm curious about. I've heard that people eat them sometimes, and it's something that anyone who does vegetable gardening or flower gardening has come into contact with. Is a Japanese beetle. Do you know anything about that or its edibility?
I'm a little bit less familiar with the Japanese beetle. What does it come in the larval form?
I'm not sure. I've seen people eating them in the adult form. It's kind of like a shiny carapace. Looks quite crunchy, I would say.
Yeah. They're pretty. It's a type of scarab beetle. Okay.
They destroy gardens. Like, you just come outside and they'll have stripped your vegetables right down.
Oh, so, yeah, I know this one.
And they kind of cluster on everything. And they're very easy to pick because I pick them all the time as I'm like cleaning them off my plants. You just kind of bat them into a bucket of water. Yeah, but I've heard about people eating them, so I was kind of curious about that.
Online says they're edible. Yeah. I haven't done a ton. I've never tried them myself, but I am a fan of the gardening approach of like, I'll eat you before you eat my crops.
Yeah.
Like tobacco worms are a great example of that. Or those like green ones with the horns
or like
on
the
them.
big, what are they called? The big tomato tobacco ones.
Yeah.
The tomato ones are like the
horn something.
Yeah. That one. Whoa. It's on a tomato. You're serving it on a tomato. That's phenomenal.
I served that like a little caprese. So I put like mozzarella cheese inside of it.
Oh, that's cool.
Really good. Not everyone's cup of tea, but for me, really cool.
So you've got the tobacco worms. What are the other ones? The green ones. They look like they have big eyes and the horn or horn on the back.
Horn tomato worms.
Or that's what they're called. Horn tomato worms. Sorry.
Yeah, from the hawk moth.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so these things normally garden pests are okay, but yeah, again, I'd recommend looking everything up. If you're not sure, don't eat it.
I guess what are some things we should avoid? If you see it, definitely don't in a common landscape setting. Like if I was out and I'm like, I'm going to go foraging for insects today, and what should I like? Aside from, you said fuzzy, brightly colored, spiky, what like insects? Like don't do that.
Yeah, I'd say my rule of thumbs are like no slugs again, because I know those are some people are skilled at that. Just anything that has a potentially poisonous diet, I'd stay well away from. I'd stay away from anything that's endangered as well. You know, bees and wasps are pretty like yummy, but we shouldn't be eating, especially like bee larvae. Like that stuff's delicious. It's fed on nectar, but since bees are more endangered, we don't want to touch that. And then hornets and bees. And a couple other insects have stingers that, whether you cook it or not, it doesn't matter. It can still get you. So be careful with all those. Yeah.
I once got stung by a bee stinger outside of a bee as a kid. We were playing with them, trying to take them. It's a long story. I grew up in very rural communities, so we had a lot of free time on our hands. We were squishing the bees and taking the bee stingers out. Don't ask me why. And as I was doing that, I got stung. Yeah.
Well, no, I want to know why.
Some poetic justice.
Why were we taking it out? That was just whatever we were doing at the moment. But I remember running to my grandparents and being like, I'm stung on the finger. And they're like, how'd you get stung on the finger? And then I told them the story and they were less sympathetic.
Understandably so.
Yeah. Let's go back to the tarantula.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
What does a tarantula taste like?
So it's, I think it has two pretty different flavor categories. The thorax is, and again, these things they vary widely, like depending on the diet of the insect, like the life cycle stage it is, all that stuff. So there's like a lot of variance in flavor. But to me, in the thorax, so like the middle body segment of the tarantula, was a little bit fishier than I was looking for. I like the bugs that are more earthy, umami, nutty, which a lot of the crickets and mealworms and these things with exoskeleton forward flavor profiles taste like. And then there's the insects that have shrimpier or crabbier or like fishier flavors. And those ones I normally need to incorporate into a meal to enjoy them. So the thorax is a little fishy. The legs are like really good beef jerky, and they're fun to eat. Yeah, you take a little lighter up the leg and torch the hair off and then eat it. If you want to. Yeah. I
don't know. I'm not a spider person at all, so somebody would have to do all this for me, and I would just sample after.
Understood. Cambodia eats lots of tarantulas, so if you're over there, you can get a professionally made one.
Oh, that's a good one. Do that. All right. So, Adam, let's do the taste test, and then Aly, could you tell us some of your like favorite recipes after that, and then we'll kind of close out from there. So, all right, Adam, what's up first? I'm so excited for you. I'm bummed that mine didn't arrive because I wanted to do this.
First, I think so. I just have so for people who aren't watching, I just have a little bag of mixed bugs that I purchased online, and like I said, there's grasshoppers, mole crickets, silkworms, field crickets, and sago worms in here. So I'll start with maybe a grasshopper, which I've had before in Mexico, and I've really enjoyed. And these have been just, I think, dried and cooked and salted. It's kind of like eating like sunflower seeds or something. It's like crunchy. It has like, some umami to it, a little bit of like nuttiness, and it eats like a chip. Like it's really, really just fine. Nothing crazy about it. Next, I think this is a sago worm, or part of it.
Yes.
So the sago worm is like more, seems like there's more to it. Like the grasshopper almost seemed hollow. This one seems a lot more, like thicker, and then it has like, almost like hazelnut. Like it reminds me almost of Christmas. Like, I grew up in a Dutch family, and we always ate hazelnut chocolate at Christmas. And it kind of reminds me of Christmas a little bit weirdly, I think, from that flavor. That's a pretty tasty one, actually.
That's so spot on. I've said like the same thing.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, now for the mole cricket, I think this is. That one's a little more chalky, but it might just be the way they cook them. And not so much flavor. I mostly just taste the salt in it. It's pretty mild, I think. But once again, nothing strange or exotic or anything like that. I'm just digging around here now for a cricket or field cricket. I feel like these, because they're all mixed together, have a bit of the same flavor overall, which is going to happen to anything. But I do taste individual things. Once again, it's like there's that kind of nuttiness, a little bit earthiness, some umami. It kind of reminds me a little bit of mushroom powder, to be honest, which makes me even want to try turning in bug powder and making it with meat even more so. And then lastly, what did I miss? Oh, a silkworm. And silkworm, it's like almost like an oystery flavor, like a not fishy, but like you know how oysters can be like pleasantly metallic or something like that? There's almost like that kind of flavor to it. Yeah, so they're all actually pretty delicious, and I'm shocked at how different they taste from each other. Like especially the sago worm, which I think was my favorite. And the crickets kind of taste similar, but everything kind of has its own texture and flavor, which is pretty cool. The worms, dried out like they are and cooked, actually have a really pleasant crunch and thickness to them, which I'm actually a little surprised about. Where the crickets and the grasshoppers and everything seem more like a crunchy exterior with a hollow interior. The worms seem like just kind of crunchy all the way through, which I actually prefer a little bit.
Would you akin to like the worms? I'm thinking about like those puffed Cheetos, like in that crunchiness. Kind of, but they kind of end up more like seeds, like sunflower seeds or pumpkin seeds when you eat them, and there's kind of like gritty in your teeth. Not gritty, but like that kind of, where Cheetos just kind of melt in your mouth. Yeah. These ones have more of like that nutty grittiness. So it's like eating a handful of sunflower seeds, like shelled sunflower seeds, I think, more than anything. Totally awesome. Totally fine. I would eat that anytime, and I'm going to save the rest for cooking with, I think. Man, I wish mine were here. I'm so bummed about that. They'll be here tomorrow. Well, I won't be here tomorrow, but they'll be here tomorrow. So you have to bring some, Adam. Maybe we can taste a couple in Montreal. That's awesome. Mm-hmm.
You just dove in. Like, I can tell you create recipes. Like, that was a very got it. Nice. The silkworm, I was like very curious because that was the one flavor profile. I used to work with wine people a lot more to get, okay, what is this flavor profile? What does it match with? And for the silkworm, it was the one we struggled with because he would say things like, tastes like a mouthful of concrete in a good way, or it tastes like a green raw vegetable. What you said about the metallic-iness, like there's something
there that's hard to describe. Yeah.
Huh.
Whereas everything else was pretty familiar and like had a good, corollary or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to place it. It's going to probably haunt my dreams all night, that flavor. Trying to place where I recognize it from.
This is a message from sponsor Intuit TurboTax. Taxes was getting frustrated by your forms. Now, Taxes is uploading your forms with a snap, and a TurboTax expert will do your taxes for you. One who's backed by the latest tech, which cross-checks millions of data points for absolute accuracy, all of which makes it easy for you to get the most money back, guaranteed. Get an expert now at TurboTax.com. Only available with TurboTax Live Full Service. See guaranteed details at TurboTax.com/guarantees.
This episode is brought to you by Indeed. When your computer breaks, you don't wait for it to magically start working again. You fix the problem. So why wait to hire the people your company desperately needs? Use Indeed's sponsored jobs to hire top talent fast. And even better, you only pay for results. There's no need to wait. Speed up your hiring with a $75 sponsored job credit at Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply.
All right, Aly, what are some of your favorite recipes?
Yeah. So one of my go-tos is chocolate chip cookies because it's a cute little way to get in. I think there is a huge future for the bug industry, not just as a high protein, high healthy fat, like functional food, but in communities that have more sensitive stomachs, because maybe counterintuitively, like insects are much easier to absorb than everything that's ultra processed. And then even a lot of other foods, like the lower you go on the food chain, the more efficient that thing is at converting what it's eating into its body fat, and like the more bioavailable, it's like a food source to more life forms. And so it has to be more bioavailable. More trophic layers rely on it for nutrition. And so insects are really easy to digest. I hope there's a big future in baby food for them. We're already seeing pet food really hop on that trend, since that one's the one that is paying premiums right now. Like, people are starting to see how negatively processed dog food is impacting their dogs' physical and mental health, and there's dog allergies now. It's really sad. So there's a shift back towards whole foods that are natural and easy to absorb. So in the gluten-free community, we can use high protein cricket powder instead of flour. And you need a different rising agent, since that would be missing. But chocolate chip cookies are like, should I just list off the recipe itself?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, I have it written down here. You need half cup of soft butter, half cup of sugar, half cup of brown sugar, 1 egg, 1 teaspoon vanilla, 1 teaspoon hot water, 1/4 teaspoon salt, 1 1/4 cups of cricket flour, 3/4 of a bag of mini chocolate chips, and I like to add whole roasted crickets on top after when they're cooling. And then just follow standard cookie instructions and go for it. And some people prefer to add in flour as well, so that you get that rise. Otherwise, they're going to be more like biscuits than cookies, but still pretty good. What I like about them is the peanut flavor of the cricket kind of makes them feel like peanut butter chocolate chip cookies, even though it's just chocolate chip cookies.
Oh, cool. But people with peanut allergies would could appreciate that.
Right. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Awesome. Another quick favorite of mine is real ants on a log, where I'll just use celery and some peanut butter and ants. I also I make homemade sushi, and if you do too, you can consider lots of insects as potential like agents of crunch instead of tempura.
Yeah. I was thinking when you were talking about scorpions, of doing the soft shell crab sushi with the scorpions in it. That's what was going through my head when we were talking about it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the sushi story is pretty similar to the insect story, where like the quick on that is in the 1960s, a lot of xenophobia, a lot of fear of the unknown and others was rampant, and sushi was not big yet in the US, and it was considered gross Eastern food. What happened was, I think, now it's fuzzy in my mind, I think Ronald Reagan or some impressive celebrity was photographed eating sushi, and a chef had been to Japan, came back over here, and wanted to water it down for Americans, and so made the Californian roll. And then you just get a couple celebrities pictured eating it. Now it's no longer gross, but trendy. And that's a similar, we don't want insects to be trendy, but we want them to be cool and kind of just accepted in. And so hopefully they'll follow a similar path. That's the goal. But sushi is a great vehicle to enjoy bugs on. And then another like simple one is you can pan fry some crickets with butter, and garlic, and olive oil and salt, and turn them into like crispy cricket croutons, and they're really good in salads for an extra protein kick. I try to look for ways to like celebrate the bugs if you're into that stuff, because I think it's pretty cool. I'll make little mini pizzas. Another simple recipe is one of my staples, a mealworm lentil salad. This one is half a can of lentils, a cup of cherry tomatoes, a fourth of a cup of chives, a fourth of a cup of white wine vinegar, a fourth of a cup of parsley, a fourth of a cup of roasted mealworms and or grasshoppers, olive oil, salt, and pepper to taste, and just stir them all together, and it's a really good salad.
You get all your fiber and protein you need for the day, and all at once, you're good to go.
Yeah. I for my own personal reasons have been I've been recovering from a pretty intense chronic pain thing that started about 4 years ago. I have multiple fractures in my spine, and there was like a question of, will I be able to walk? Will I be able to work? Any like repetitive movements? It was like really scary. And instead of going the surgical route, I did a lot of medical things, but backed it all up with a really nutritious diet. And I'm convinced that that's what gave me the edge I needed. Like it's low inflammatory foods that give your body the building blocks that it needs to make repairs. And so that's another reason why I'm so passionate about bugs is I think they've come through for me time and time again, and they're just a great way to actually treat food as fuel and as something fun and exciting. And I have friends with kids now, and they'll get excited about it with me. The adults, not so much, but it's a fun because kids are so open-minded, and they'll be like very interested in the ingredients, and you can teach them about where food comes from and like connect them to food more than they would be if they're eating an ultra processed like fake meat burger or something. I don't know.
Definitely. I had my friend's kid over here last weekend. My friends visited with their kid, and he saw the little package of bugs on the table, and we all ended up trying one together, and he was really brave about it and awesome. It was good. It was a lot of fun.
Fearless.
Oh, that's great. Do you have any, like, I would say top end gourmet ones that you do? I mean, the caprese salad was pretty impressive. Any ones that are like showstoppers?
Yeah. So I myself am not a chef, and I'm like the ingredient connoisseur, but my favorite events are when I get to work with chefs or at culinary schools and like let them do their magic. And so these are not my own recipes, but there was a chef that worked with black ants and made this incredible chutney. I'll have to grab that recipe, but I know that's common in India, is like using a bunch of the different flavors and ants to make different chutneys. Those are so good.
That's really
so
cool.
Yeah. Other showstoppers are my own tacos, of course. Like, that I've learned how to make a mean chapulines taco.
It's funny how your mind plays tricks on you with bugs, because I was eating chapulines out of the bag in Mexico. I ate them on a taco, it was fine. And then I got a torta, like just a sandwich, and I went to put it in my mouth, and there was one leg sticking out of the side, and that was enough to be like, oh. After eating like loads of them already, it's just that weird feeling in your head of like, there's something wrong with that. There's a bug in my sandwich.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Or like after you're done eating some bugs, you do have to look out for like
a little bit of
errant leg in your teeth. That's so good. Yeah. I'll can I email you like the grasshopper taco recipe
absolutely,
and a couple of the other ones? So I'm not just listing off things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, with that, I guess we're on the tail end of time. Any sort of last thoughts you want to leave us or the guests with as far as like eating insects?
Well, thank you. Like this has been really fun. Definitely feel like found a new section of like my people. And something that Adam and I were talking about a little bit in the beginning was connection and just kind of the struggle that we face as people who are interested in nature and natural things and more of a holistic approach to life, yet have a lot of our lives in front of a screen. So I think there's like this tension today that makes it a little hard to know what to do. And a lot of people are trying to be more sustainable or just eat more nutritionally dense food, whatever. And they're confused by all the options out there. Like, what could I do that would make a difference? Or like, there's so much out there. Like, how do you even know what's good anymore? And how do you distinguish between marketing and fact? And there was a thought piece I read that really stuck with me, and I want to share just two questions from it. So when we're thinking about like, is this good for our food system or good for me? There's two questions that should be asked more often instead of like, does it scale or how productive is it? The first is, how does a solution impact the connection between people, their food, and where that food comes from? Does it, what I was saying about the kids eating an ultra processed burger, like we're getting further and further away from what food is, where it comes from. And if you grew up in a city, you might have never seen where food comes from. You think it comes from the aisle in a grocery store. So that's the first one. And the second one is, how does it affect who has control over and who can participate in the production and distribution of food? And that one I think is huge for all of us, where we're moving into a world where there's more patents and trade secrets and like factories where like quasi food-ish things are being created. And, individuals, you and me, like we're never going to make that stuff. But I fear a world where we're very controlled by who controls the creation of food and the distribution of food. And so anytime you can support something that puts the power back into the hands of the people or producers that works at a small scale and at a large scale, that's a good thing. And that's what I see insects being the best at supporting is, it's it's a natural solution, evolution backed. It just works. It's how the world works. And we scaled up a lot of different crops and a lot of different animals, but we forgot about nature's cleanup crew, and just a facilitator of like good agriculture. So I just encourage people to have an open mind and explore this thing that is like so little, but could be so big in terms of its impact.
That's great.
Oh, that's awesome. Adam, last thoughts?
First, did you want to let our listeners know where they could find you online, or
yes.
How to contact you if they have any questions, or where to find events you have to be throwing?
Yeah, bugible.com, and that's my handle on all the socials. And I don't have a local event coming up, but actually in DC in March, mid-March, I'll be at the National STEM Foundation, National STEM Festival, sorry. And it's like bringing back science festivals to DC, and regenerative agriculture is one of the fields of science that we're promoting. And there'll be a couple nerds like me there. And then
sweet.
like science fairs, tables, and all these high school kids presenting their, world improving research. So that's the next thing on my radar.
Oh, that's awesome.
Swing by.
Yeah, I will totally swing by. We'll connect for sure. One of my favorite things about podcasting is having people on that are really passionate about food. And I love the fact that you are. And, I consider both Adam and myself, like, we're pretty deep in the world of food ourselves. Like, I spend more time probably thinking about food than anything else. It's either good or bad. But you've, like, enlightened me on so many levels, and I appreciate it so very much. And the mission and all you've taken on and the community that you represent to is doing great things. And, much like Sushi, we see the positive change, and we're going to insects restaurants in the next 10 years and, enjoying it for ourselves at home as a common snack or food or part of a great meal. And we're there with the rest of the world. And I think it's really great. So please keep up the awesome, awesome work.
Thank you. And right back at you guys. I'm going to be checking out more of your world and learning many a thing. So thank you.
Well, thank you. For everybody that's listening out there, we'll include the links to the show notes online. And then whatever podcast platform you're listening to, please punch that 5-star button. Leave us a review. Tell us we're doing right, or, tell us we're doing wrong. Thanks, everybody. Have a good night.